Hello and good morning. Welcome to Conversations at Foothills, a series of podcasts organized by ISSRA at the National Defense University. I'm your host, Urva Adeen, and today we'll be discussing a topic that is both legally dense and also geopolitically significant: India's recent abeyance of the Indus Waters Treaty and what that means in legal terms for Pakistan's general future and also for the broader legal international order. And to do that, today I am joined by ISRA's very own Ms. Maham Ayaz, who is a research fellow at the Center of Excellence for International Law. She specializes in transboundary water disputes such as the Indus Waters Treaty, and also likes to examine the intersection of both humanitarian and strategic concerns in protracted conflicts such as Kashmir and Palestine. Mom, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you so much, Urva, and for such a nice intro.
To set the scene for our viewers and for some background context, if you could briefly describe what the Indus Waters Treaty actually is and why it's so important for Pakistan.
Definitely. So, Indus Waters Treaty, Urva, basically is a water sharing agreement. If you simplify it, it is just a water sharing agreement. It is a water sharing agreement between India and Pakistan that was signed in 1960. So back in 1960, the idea was that because Pakistan is a lower riparian state, it gets a big chunk of its water from India that flows into Pakistan. So the idea was to distribute the rivers. The western rivers were given to Pakistan for its use, and the eastern were given to India. So on the western rivers per se, as per the treaty, India can use the water because obviously the water is coming from India, but it can only use it for non-consumptive purposes, meaning thereby it can have run-of-the-river projects on it, but it cannot store the water, whereas Pakistan can store the water for the western rivers. Whereas for the eastern rivers, India can store the water. So it's basically a water sharing agreement between the two countries.
And so that means it directly ties into Pakistan's water security because about 90% of our population lives around the Indus Basin.
Definitely, yes.
So that's a very, very critical issue. But when it comes to the word abeyance, right,
Yes.
that's not a commonly used term in treaty law in generally. So when India is using it, what does it exactly mean? And is it recognized in the Indus Water Treaty's own clauses and also in the broader international law
Right.
terms?
So, for a layman person and for our viewers as well, the word abeyance basically means that something has been temporarily halted or suspended. What it means by in law is basically that a function of a certain treaty or a certain action has been for a certain period of time has been halted or has been suspended. In Indus Waters Treaty, there is no usage of the word abeyance. The reason being because it is a lower riparian state that is involved in the water sharing agreement. So to ensure that it does not suffer from the anxiety of the water being stopped temporarily, the idea being that it only involves modification and termination, that too through mutual consent. However, in this particular scenario, what has happened is that India has held in abeyance the treaty unilaterally, and it can't do so under the pretext of the treaty itself and also under the international law regime as well.
So the term is deliberately omitted from
Yes.
the treaty to
Yes.
protect the lower riparian states and prevent
Yes.
further weaponization and politicization of
Of the water. Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. So moving on to like the greater international order, right? How can a state or can a state actually unilaterally suspend a treaty? It's not just specific to water treaties,
Fair
but
enough.
in general. Can
Yeah.
anybody just come up and say we don't want to be part of this anymore? And can they suspend it?
So, no, basically. There are certain grounds in international law that have to be fulfilled for you to suspend, terminate, withdraw from the treaty. And they are enshrined in the Vienna Convention of the Law Treaties and also in customary international law. So the major grounds are that the other party, the other state, has materially breached the treaty. So what material breach means? Materially breaching means that they have violated the basic essence of the treaty, and they have violated it in such a way that the treaty cannot function now. So which has not happened in this particular
And
case.
the violation, is it like mentioned explicitly, like, okay, if you do this, that's considered a violation?
So in international law, you cannot specifically mention such things because treaties vary, their intent varies. So treaties are of different kinds. So you cannot basically have as to what exactly constitutes material breach. Like you can't have that for every single treaty. You can have an umbrella term which is there in the Vienna Convention, the law of treaties. The idea being that if there is a violation that actually violates the fundamental purpose of the treaty, that constitutes the violation of the treaty itself,
Like the principle of
the
it.
principle of it, then it is a material breach.
That makes sense.
Yes.
And also keeping it a little vague leaves a lot of room for flexibility and to
Yes.
maneuver. Yeah, I think that's important for law.
Yes, it is. But there's also another ground, which is fundamental change in circumstances, which India has cited as well before. So the fundamental change in circumstances basically means that there has been some change in circumstances which were so vital for the treaty to exist in the first place that now the treaty cannot exist.
That
Yeah.
actually was my next question.
Okay.
Was India's decision to seek a pause, did it happen out of the blue, or were there circumstances leading up to this point that culminated into this?
Okay, so it has to be understood that these whole series of events, or this holding in abeyance of the treaty, was not unexpected. So in 2023, there were multiple notices by India to Pakistan that they want to modify the treaty. They want to modify the treaty. But they were citing multiple grounds on it. They were citing that Pakistan has violated the treaty. Then they were citing fundamental change in circumstances of the treaty. You have to understand, in legal terminologies, these two things are very different. So you cannot at one point say that it was a violation, then at the other point say that there was fundamental change in circumstance. So yeah, so it was not unexpected. And the Prime Minister Modi in 2016 categorically stated that blood and water cannot flow together. So it's not unexpected. I mean, it's not out of the blue. But is it legal? No.
You know, this is very important context because it makes you realize that the point that we're at now, right, it's a culmination of multiple factors like procedural roadblocks, a lot of politics as well, and tactics to perhaps pressurize the other side into, you know, doing things and undermining the treaty's resolution framework in general. But my next question is about the general implications of India's action on Pakistan in both the long and short terms. I mean, how is the general going to experience the impact of India's announcement?
The treaty itself. So you have to understand this. In the short term, India cannot withhold the water because currently we are going through a monsoon season, and that's a high flow season particularly. The water, it's billion cubics of water flowing from from India to Pakistan. So when such a large quantity of water is flowing, you cannot just stop it from the run of the river project.
Infrastructural capacity.
Yes,
to store
which
the
India
water.
does not have currently. But India can do so in dry seasons. So which start, I believe, in the late winters and early spring. It can do so. It cannot do so completely, but it can alter the timings of the water flowing into the Pakistan. So that can be detrimental for the agriculture of Pakistan. Why? Because agriculture depends upon water coming rightly on right times, right? And if it stops water maybe even for a week, that can have drastic effects on Pakistan's agriculture. So yes, for short term and long term, it can have adverse effects on Pakistan's agriculture.
This becomes even more worrying when we look at how climate change is impacting our water situation. We have a really low water table. We have inconsistent rainfall. We have a lot of droughts, right? And so with India declaring abeyance of the Indus Waters Treaty and then also suffering the impacts of climate change, what does the future look like for Pakistan? What are the potential threats and risks that it must be prepared for?
So Pakistan currently is already at the forefront of fighting the climate change.
Yeah, it's the most vulnerable to
You're
it.
right. So in Indus Waters Treaty, there were certain provisions that related to the sharing of hydrological data between India and Pakistan. So the idea being that if when the hydrological data was shared with Pakistan, Pakistan could preempt the floods coming into the country and also address them properly, and it would do the capacity building. However, if India stops sharing that hydrological data because it has held the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, it can make Pakistan more vulnerable to floods, right? And in longer terms, maybe in 10 years, 15 years, or maybe in 5 years, nobody can predict that. But India can actually start having bigger infrastructures, and the infrastructures that are not run of the rivers, but rather are storage capacity infrastructures for water on the rivers, on the western rivers. What that can do is that can actually stop bulks of water that's coming into Pakistan. That can be very detrimental and can adversely affect the population of Pakistan.
Especially during the dry seasons.
Yes.
Especially when we're planting different
crops,
and we need water.
yes. Yeah.
So moving on to, the resolution of this problem, what are the legal mechanisms that Pakistan has at its disposal, both under the clauses of the Indus Water Treaty and
Okay.
also in general? I mean, what are the different steps Pakistan can take, has taken, or will take to address this issue?
So yes, it has different avenues for dispute resolution. One of them being in the Indus Waters Treaty itself. So Article 9 of the Indus Waters Treaty is regarding the dispute resolution mechanism, right? So the dispute resolution mechanism provides for the court of arbitration. One instance is the court of arbitration. So Indus Waters Treaty arbitration is currently undergoing under the PCA, Permanent Court of Arbitration. And very recently, Permanent Court of Arbitration has given a supplement award regarding its competency, that it is still competent to arbitrate on the issue. And it has also particularly stated that Indus Waters Treaty being held in abeyance by India is not a legal move, and it is still competent under the Indus Waters Treaty regime. So that reinforces what we have already been saying. That is one of the avenues that Pakistan can go towards.
And also, when people talk about international law, the first institution or regime that comes to everyone's mind is the International Court of Justice.
Yes.
So can it play a role in this issue, or is it not its domain? Can Pakistan use the ICJ to further its case, or
Okay.
what's that like?
So yes, Pakistan can. Pakistan can get an advisory opinion from International Court of Justice. What it can do is it can make the United Nations General Assembly get an advisory opinion from the ICJ itself under the Article 96 of the UN Charter. However, that will not be binding on India because India will not be part of that. But it can have some, strategic and diplomatic importance, but that's about it. It will not be binding. But diplomatically, it can be a great tool for Pakistan.
So
Yes.
it's going to help with the narrative.
Yes.
That actually brings me to my next question, which is, amidst all of this, are there any strategic opportunities for Pakistan?
Okay.
When it's furthering its case in the international community in different legal
Yeah.
forums, what opportunities does it have?
Okay, so every problem comes with an opportunity. That's something that we have all been told since we were little kids. This problem is very similar. Even though Indus Waters Treaty being held in abeyance, Indus Waters Treaty being the lifeline for Pakistan, is very crucial. This whole act is very detrimental to Pakistan. However, there is certain opportunity. The opportunity lies in reinforcing the Kashmir issue now through water lens as well. So you have to understand the Kashmir issue at heart lies in self-determination. The right of self-determination of the people of the Kashmir has been suppressed for decades. Because of this suppression, we see different attacks, different issues arising in Kashmir. And one of those attacks was the Pahalgam attack. And that Pahalgam attack was attributed to Pakistan without a shred of evidence. And that led towards the holding of Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. I mean, that's the line of thought that India is drawing for us. So the problem lies maybe in solving Kashmir issue. So what Pakistan can do is it can reinforce the Kashmir issue on the global stage again. And maybe now through the lens of water, because water and climate change is something that is that the international community sees very closely. So maybe Pakistan can reiterate again and again that solve Kashmir's issues, give the right of self-determination to the people of Kashmiri, and maybe that will actually solve a lot of things for this region, and maybe the Indus Waters Treaty as well.
And I also think that for someone living on, in some other country, in some other part of the world, at the end of the day, this Indus Waters Treaty dispute and overall the Kashmir dispute, it's a very bilateral thing. It doesn't impact them. Narrative in a way, and you tell the world that what India can potentially do is set a precedent for upper riparian states to weaponize water and also get away with it. This issue isn't just about Pakistan's water, it's also about every other lower riparian state's water security.
Oh yes, definitely. Also, you have to understand that if India is, if it's okay with violating such a successful transboundary agreement, so what do you have to say about its other commitments? The world has to think if India is okay in violating an international law so easily, what it will do with other commitments. So this is not just for Pakistan. You have to understand that it will have regional effects. So Pakistan needs to address this issue accordingly. Otherwise, if we do it in isolation, if Pakistan is only doing it on its own, so in global politics, you have to understand geopolitically, no country can do whatever it wants to do alone. There has to be, especially for a country like Pakistan, Pakistan needs geopolitical support. And the other countries need to understand it's not just having an effect on Pakistan, it will have regional effects. So yes, Pakistan will have to join hands with others to tackle this issue.
Apart from Kashmir, is Gilgit Baltistan also an issue that Pakistan can perhaps highlight within this Indus Waters Treaty dispute?
So yes, it is another strategic opportunity for Pakistan. Gilgit Baltistan has long been not given a provisional status, provincial status in Pakistan's constitution. One of the reasons being that Pakistan honors its plebiscite framework, and the plebiscite framework, traditional plebiscite framework that has been there. But however, what we can do now is that we can integrate Gilgit Baltistan and give it a provisional provincial status under the Constitution of Pakistan, and do so because India holding Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance really undermines the traditional plebiscite framework itself, right? So maybe yes, Gilgit Baltistan, this is another strategic opportunity that maybe we can integrate Gilgit Baltistan into Pakistan as well. So yes.
Great. And I think the most important theme that our viewers can take away from this is that in international law, states cannot unilaterally, modify treaties or suspend them without material breach from the other side. Like there's a due process that must be followed.
Yes.
And there's a criteria that must be satisfied for a treaty to even be considered under suspension.
Yes.
Right? None of which happened in Pakistan's case over here. Because if this principle isn't respected, if its integrity isn't upheld, then that defeats the whole point of having a treaty regime, an international treaty regime.
So, and having even international law.
Yes.
If everybody can just violate it, every state feels like it can violate it on its own whims and fancies, then what is the point of having it in the first place?
Exactly. So the Indus Waters Treaty dispute isn't just between India and Pakistan. It's an issue that should be important to every lawyer in the international realm,
Yes.
right? Anyone who believes in the credibility of the international legal system must take this issue very seriously, must
Yes.
raise their voice in this issue very seriously.
And on this note, Pakistan also has to understand that it cannot operate in isolation. Geopolitical alignments, geopolitical support is crucial for advocating for such rights.
Yeah. Plus, we have other lower riparian neighbors
Yes.
with India, like Bangladesh.
Basically, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much for your time, Maham.
Not at all. Thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Right. And on that note, we'll be concluding today's podcast. You were watching Conversations at Foothills, which is both organized and recorded by ISSRA at the National Defense University. Until next time, goodbye.